What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Very Cold Lasagna, the podcast that houses a safe and open listening platform for casual, cold, and even the dumbest takes on the world of WWE, AEW, the NFL, and the wide world of pro wrestling and sports in general. I'm your host, Dylan Lasagna, and it's time to open up that fridge, grab that very cold lasagna for some more dumb takes on pro wrestling. And today, we're going back into that old icebox, the coldest section of the fridge here on the podcast for another blast of the past, another retro review. It's a blast of the past because today we're going to be taking a look at WWE Money in the Bank. Yes, it's kind of like unofficially Money in the Bank week here on Very Cold Lasagna because we're going back in time to 2011 for the second annual Money in the Bank pay-per-view. I initially wanted to talk about this last week on the podcast when this particular event took place, but obviously I was busy during that time with another project I was doing non-related to this stuff and some personal matters that was also going on in my life during that week. But I'm here. I'm finally get to cover it, even though the event that took place over 10 years ago now, it hit its 10-year anniversary just last week. And hey, better late than never, right? Better late than never to cover this particular pay-per-view event because it was headlined by a match that is still I guess you could call it talked about, kind of, to this day. It was given accolades, a 5-star match review, match of the year awards by various pro wrestling outlets, and that is CM Punk versus John Cena for the WWE Championship in the main event in CM Punk's hometown. And yeah, this was pretty much a one-match show. This was pretty much what the 2011 Money in the Bank pay-per-view was. A one-match show headlined by the WWE Championship, and it was clear, like going into this, that storyline-wise, that CM Punk made his intentions to leave the WWE Championship in his hometown of Chicago, Illinois, with the WWE title. Now, as I explained in the Pipe Bomb retro review a couple weeks ago, that obviously CM Punk didn't leave WWE, but as we'll continue on with this retro review of Money in the Bank, we're going to talk about that even further. But for now, welcome to another edition of the Old Icebox. For this edition, we're going to be talking about the 2011 Money in the Bank pay-per-view. But before we continue on with this retro review, before we get officially underway, we got to shill ourselves here on the podcast because we always love to do it. We always love to plug ourselves here on the show. So with that being said, make sure to check me out. Check out this beautiful face when I do the video version here on YouTube. Subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you'll be notified of the video episodes that come out, as well as exclusive extras like news pieces, rants, other extras, as well as clips from the show. And if you want to listen to me on the road or in the shower, wherever you are, listen to me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor FM, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna. So now let's get into today's topic, and that is the 2011 Money in the Bank retro review. Now, this took place on July 17th, 2011. 2011 was, I don't know, it was kind of a time for wrestling fans. There was not like going back in time, just looking at the roster, there was not a lot of star power. There was just not a lot. Now, when I was a kid, when I was a wee little kid back in middle school, when in the 8th grade, when I was about to graduate from middle school, go to high school, start a new chapter in my life with school. This was WWE during this time was, well, at least for me, it was all fun and stuff. I was a fan of Cena, Punk, Orton. I think at the time Nexus 2. I was actually into like I was buying into these PG era angles. Like, again, can you blame me? I was like, how old was I? Like 12 or 13 years old. So I was pretty naive. And, to be honest, I'm still kind of pretty naive. But 10 years later, man, it's kind of crazy to believe that this 2011 roster that consisted of a lot of like people that we're going to discuss, like Alex Riley, Justin Gabriel, Heath Slater, Evan Bourne, Kofi Kingston, David Otunga, Michael McGillicuddy, Husky Harris, aka Bray Wyatt, who else? Mason Ryan, Wade Barrett, Ezekiel Jackson. Who else can I name at the top of my head? The Miz. The Miz was on there. And at the time, he was, at one point in 2011, he was WWE champion. But even with all the jobbers that were there, you had John Cena still there, Randy Orton still there, Rey Mysterio was still there. The Rock was there for like up until the night after WrestleMania, but he wasn't doing much. He was hosting, but at least you had The Rock there, and he set up that match with Cena for next year's WrestleMania. CM Punk, obviously, he rose to stardom that year, and then, honestly, that's pretty much it. Those were your main guys. Oh, Mark Henry, and then Sheamus. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of like top level guys that were there. Oh, there was Edge before he had that sad retirement, his first retirement. Christian, and Big Show. There was a lot of guys that were top level talent, but very few and far in 2011. So going into this Money in the Bank pay-per-view, I haven't watched it, to be honest with you, since the first time. In 2000, like 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, I haven't watched this. And it's kind of strange watching it then, had to I honestly, when I first watched it, I was, doing it the other way as I do today. But when I couldn't, at some point, there was, I still kind of recall how I watched it. There were at some points where I lost the feed, the live, feed, in air quotes. And then I had to constantly go to WWE.com and click the refresh button to see what would happen next. That's how I rolled back then. Whenever I couldn't have access to a feed of the pay-per-view live, I would go to WWE.com, continually hit the refresh button, see the match results, and see what was going on. And obviously not everything was live and there, here and there. And yeah, that's how I got all caught up with the WWE back then. So anyway, Money in the Bank 2011, it takes place in the Allstate Arena in Chicago, Illinois. Like I said before, the biggest match on this card was CM Punk versus John Cena for the WWE Championship. This is the biggest match, not just for the pay-per-view, but probably at the time, the biggest match for modern wrestling, because it turned out to be a shift for modern wrestling, because after this match, it kind of gave way to gradually more opportunities for wrestlers like Punk to rise up, to be more prominently featured, whether it's on the upper mid card or even the main event status. And then sooner or later, with Daniel Bryan main eventing WrestleMania 30, 3 years later, it empowered that notion that, if a guy like Punk, regardless of the charisma or the personality, if he can main event a pay-per-view, a high quality pay-per-view, then so can I. And that motion, like paved way for today's wrestling. Like a lot of like, you know, like wrestlers, you know, the ones that do flips, kicks, and all that shit, with not a lot of charisma, not a lot of character, not a lot of personality. They main event pay-per-views today. They do main event pay-per-views, put on great matches, pal. Quote unquote great matches, by the way. But other than that, that's all they do. So going back to Cena versus Punk. Again, the biggest match on the pay-per-view, but also the biggest match for modern wrestling. But going into it, CM Punk was legit unhappy with his position in WWE, as I previously mentioned in my Pipe Bomb retro review for the old Icebox series that we do here a few weeks ago. And, you know, WWE, they felt like they had something with Punk, and Punk felt like he still could give something to the company, but he wanted a higher position, and WWE fed him a bone. He gave him a mostly open mic to speak his mind, and that became the Pipe Bomb. And they turned that into a storyline leading up to the event. They suspended, in air quotes, CM Punk for his Pipe Bomb as part of the storyline, and he was revoked at the title match that he won the week prior to the Pipe Bomb. But the previous week, the following week, John Cena threatened to leave and vacate the WWE title if Mr. McMahon didn't reinstate CM Punk. And Mr. McMahon was willing to do that. He was willing to reinstate CM Punk, but he would fire Cena if he lost the WWE title match at Money in the Bank. So, going into it, CM Punk was back. CM Punk was set to try to renegotiate a new deal with Mr. McMahon, but it didn't happen. So it was all but assured that CM Punk, if he won, he was going to leave in storyline, obviously, with the WWE title. Now, again, as I talked about a couple weeks ago, that CM Punk would literally sign a new deal at the last minute, right before the match started. So, right before he came out, he signed a new deal. So, if you want to learn more, go watch my retro review of the Pipe Bomb promo a couple weeks ago. And I would also highly recommend the Best in the World documentary that WWE did, I think, almost a decade ago. So also on this card, we had a World Heavyweight Championship match. Yes, the big gold belt that I still highly prefer over the Blue Universal Championship between Randy Orton and Christian. Now, I know a lot of people crap on Randy Orton and Christian, but this feud was actually pretty good. I forget about this feud because, you know, obviously it happened over a decade ago, but it's a pretty good feud if you like go back and watch it and try to remember what the fuck happened. So, to recap, it started after the 2011 Extreme Rules. Christian wins the vacant World Heavyweight Championship. It's vacant because Edge had to retire with that neck injury. He wins it in a ladder match against Alberto Del Rio, but he loses it 5 days later to Randy Orton on SmackDown. And then Christian fails in his rematch at Over the Limit, and then 2 weeks later, after he refs a World Heavyweight title match between Randy Orton and I think it was Sheamus or Mark Henry, I don't remember who it was. Christian turned heel, he attacked Orton, but even then, like at the next pay-per-view called Capital Punishment, yeah, that was a pay-per-view, ladies and gentlemen. Capital Punishment, think about that. They had a lot of like ridiculous names in the early 2010s because they got rid of the older ones. But anyway, he would lose again at Capital Punishment, but the referee didn't catch his foot under the bottom rope, so that led up to another match at Money in the Bank. But this time, if Randy Orton lost by disqualification or there was poor officiating, Christian would automatically get the World Heavyweight Championship. So another big match on the card was Well, it's the Big Show. The Big Show going up against Mark Henry. Now, this was a new Mark Henry. This is not the smiling Mark Henry or the angry Mark Henry that you got back in the day. This is an even angrier Mark Henry. The one that was literally ruthless, beating up people for no reason, putting people in his hall of pain. But Big Show, he wanted to fight Henry because of what he did, like after Henry's retaliation from Big Show, like beating him up. So it led to this match at Money in the Bank. So those are the three, in my opinion, the three big matches that were on this card. So we get to the show. We get to Money in the Bank 2011. We open the show with a the SmackDown Money in the Bank ladder match. Keep that in mind. There was no men's or women's Money in the Bank ladder match at this time. We'll get to what the women were doing as we go on in this retro review. So the SmackDown Money in the Bank ladder match, and this was literally a month before WWE ditched the brand extension, the first one at least. So this ladder match had a World Heavyweight Championship contract on the line, and the participants were Daniel Bryan, but this was pre-Yes Movement Daniel Bryan, Cody Rhodes, who was undergoing his ugly gimmick where he was like wearing this that face mask that athletes would wear sometimes. Heath Slater, Justin Gabriel, Wade Barrett, the three former members of the Nexus and that failed stable, the Core. Like the Core was basically the Nexus reject group. like the we're not leaders, there's no one leader, there's only 4 equals group. And then you had Kane, Sin Cara, Sheamus, and those were your Money in the Bank participants. So out of everyone that was there, only Kane and Sheamus were pretty much the only ones that I honestly thought who would win it, like back then, and even still then, like even watching it, I still thought they could have won. They should have won it, especially Kane, because he won the inaugural SmackDown ladder match at the inaugural Money in the Bank pay-per-view, and he cashed in on the World Heavyweight Champion at the time, Rey Mysterio, on that same night. And Sheamus was already a two-time. Was he a two-time? No, he was already a former. No, he was a two-time WWE champion heading into the pay-per-view. So there was at least a couple of stories, a few side stories that they were trying to tell here in this match. So at least that it had something going for it. Like at this point, like the Core was already broken up. Like, so Wade Barrett, Justin Gabriel, and Heath Slater, they fought each other at different points in the match, but they also like ganged up on the rest of the Money in the Bank field. Sheamus hit the spot of the match with a powerbomb to Sin Cara through the ladder, which was more brutal than the one that Seth Rollins did to Kevin Owens this past Sunday at Money in the Bank. And this one was like really brutal. I thought Sin Cara was having a seizure after that spot because his hand was shaking, man. It was like he was being non-responsive. I was like, damn, like I don't remember this happening, like that portion happening. It's like, that's scary. How did he survive that? And then they sent Sin Cara to the back. He never came back out. And then there's at least some things that played a role in this match. So Daniel Bryan would eventually win the contract. And then Michael Cole was like bitching and moaning that that dwarf Daniel Bryan would win. Keep that in mind. Michael Cole, for as much as I rag on him about him being a Joe Buck clone, at least with 2010, 2012, like mid 2012 Michael Cole, at least when he was a heel, he at least tried. Like, sure, he was like cringe and unbearable to some people, but he at least like put effort. He at least put effort to being a heel, like play-by-play guy. So Daniel Bryan wins the contract. Daniel Bryan would eventually cash in that contract on the Big Show 5 months later at TLC 2011 to win the World Heavyweight Championship and begin that turn towards being the yes guy heading into 2012. And he would largely go on to have a successful career, winning the WWE title multiple times, main eventing WrestleMania 30, doing a lot of things throughout his career. And, well, I don't know what he's doing now, but surely some great things. As for the other Money in the Bank participants, well, Heath Slater and Justin Gabriel, they remained jobbers for the rest of their WWE career until they were released. Wade Barrett, he was a decent mid-carder. He became a 2-time WWE champion, won King of the Ring before he was released in 2016. But he's back with the company with being an analyst on NXT with Vic Joseph every week. And after the match, Sheamus would go on to have his first like babyface run. So he would go on to be like the good guy in a feud with Mark Henry that he would lose. But still, he would become one of WWE's like go-to guys for the rest of 2011 and for many years, to be honest with you. He would be a babyface for like 4 years before he suffered an injury. Then the night after WrestleMania 31, he would go back to being heel. And he was kind of like be Big Show, like, except the Irish version. Like, he'd be switching to face and heel. But yeah, but before all that, he would go on to be one of the go-to guys on SmackDown, be one of the featured talent on that show for a few years. And Kane, he was written off by Mark Henry during that Hall of Pain campaign. On the next SmackDown, he would return 5 months later with an all-new look, attacking John Cena on the Slammy Awards. Cody Rhodes reintroduced the classic IC title design at Hell in a Cell. He later ditched that undashing gimmick. He was claimed to be set free by Randy Orton in a street fight. And then he would go on to do a couple of things before he got released in 2016, like have that storyline with the Authority that included him and his brother Goldust winning the tag team titles. And then he became that stupid Stardust gimmick for 2 years. And then, obviously, right now, he's a co-founder of All Elite Wrestling. He founded that in 2019. So, yeah, a lot of these competitors, man. Literally half the field is no longer with the company. Oh, I forgot to mention Sin Cara. Sin Cara, yeah, the rest of his WWE run was riddled with injuries. And he also, like, the guy portraying him, like they switched the actors. They switched the wrestlers portraying Sin Cara. So, yeah, Sin Cara is no longer a thing in WWE. So next on the card, and this was the point of wrestling where, people were pretty much only watching the women for, where to go, oh shit, yeah, let's look at them for what. Oh yeah. But nowadays, obviously, people want to see a woman also have that technical work rate. Oh, the great matches, like they gotta wrestle and look like Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll, Seattle Hawks, and then the Queens to the San Francisco 49ers. You know what I mean. So this was a time where people would call it now a piss break. I mean, come on. Kelly, she's a smoke show, man. She was and still is a smoke show. And at the time, true wrestling fans would cheer for her. She would cheer for her. They still cheered for her. Even if it was a very small section, they would still cheer for her. Even though the match wasn't that great, but still, Kelly, man. Good shit. One of my childhood crushes, man. I'm such a simp. So anyway, yeah, the Divas title was, that butterfly title was still a thing in 2011. So Kelly retained the title over Brie Bella. And yeah, that's pretty much that. So Kelly after this, she held the Divas title until Hell in a Cell. She lost it to Beth Phoenix there. And then afterwards, she only had one more important match with, what's her name? Maria Menounos from, that talk show or whatever that show is, Extra. Yes, they teamed up with each other to defeat Beth Phoenix and Eve Torres at WrestleMania 28. Yeah, that tag team match with the Extra correspondent that never wrestled a match, but whatever. So Kelly never wrestled after that. She took time off to heal from injuries, and then she was released that same year in 2012. Obviously for the Bellas, well, they would have a much more successful career than Kelly. Nikki would win the Divas title in 2012 before losing it to Layla a week later. And then, although they would later be released, they returned in 2013, would have a much more successful run, gained 2 reality shows, and Nikki Bella gained the then longest reigning women's title reign in WWE history. And they also got into the Hall of Fame. So, I mean, at least the Bellas are the more successful wrestlers that I talked about so far long term. So then we get to the third match, Mark Henry versus The Big Show. This was honestly the first important match of the night, because I talked about earlier. This already felt like a big fight feel. 2 big men battling out. Even though the fact that hardcore fans love to shit on The Big Show and Mark Henry, but I don't know, people love to still shit on them even when they're in AEW right now. But I gotta say, the 2011 feud, I liked it. It was good and simplistic. 2 big dudes wanted to hurt each other in as much pain as possible, and their moments, like, they stand out. Like, you had Big Show breaking the ring with Mark Henry at Vengeance 2011. Oh, I already spoiled what was going to happen with the long-term stuff. But anyway, and then you had Mark Henry breaking Big Show's ankle after this match, which, by the way, this match, well, nothing to write home about, but it was what happened during the match. Henry would dominate the Big Show after he went after his Big Show's bad knee, and it was after the match that really sold people on Mark Henry. It was when Mark Henry took a chair, wrapped it around Big Show's bad knee, and hit a Vader bomb and crushed Big Show's leg, obviously in storyline. And this set up his monster run, the Hall of Pain campaign, for the rest of the year. It's just a shame that, watching it back, everyone was chanting CM Punk. In what was a pretty good post-match segment. I'm like, guys, CM Punk is coming later, man. Like, enjoy the segment for what it was. Like, the crowd, like, if I was go back in time, fly out to Chicago and, like, rat people out, it's like, guys, this is a good segment. Why are you shitting on Henry and the Big Show right now? Like, goddamn. So, long term, Mark Henry and Big Show are still feuding with each other, but prior to that, Mark Henry had this monster run. He wrote off Kane and Vladimir Kozlov, breaking their ankles too. And then he destroyed Sheamus at SummerSlam. And then he won the World Heavyweight Championship at Night of Champions over Randy Orton. And after Hell in a Cell, the feud resumed with the Big Show. And then that's when the key moments of this feud happened. The ring-breaking superplex spot at Vengeance. Big Show breaking Mark Henry's ankle at Survivor Series, even though Big Show won via disqualification. And then Big Show finally winning the World Heavyweight Championship at TLC. But obviously, Daniel Bryan cashed in after Mark Henry attacked the Big Show. But this was a good feud. This was a good feud. There was a lot of chaos, a lot of destruction, and a lot of breaking knees. Literally a lot of breaking knees. So after this feud, Mark Henry and the Big Show tried to go after Daniel Bryan, but Daniel Bryan survived at the Royal Rumble in a steel cage match. But after that, Mark Henry had feuds with Ryback, Sheamus, and John Cena, which in that Cena feud also included the fake retirement speech, which was pretty good. Still a top tier promo. But it was also in that time span, like in 2012 to 2015, that Mark Henry also suffered various injuries, and he eventually began the transition towards retirement, but also go towards a producer and mentoring role backstage in WWE before he left for AEW. So Henry retired following WrestleMania 33. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame the next year. So as for the Big Show, he would continue to have his yearly tradition of turning face and turning heel. You know, that running gag of going face and heel. But anyway, he would win the World Heavyweight Championship again in 2012 over Sheamus. And he would also be involved in some storylines with The Authority in 2013, and Brock Lesnar in 2014. And he would also join the same stable that made him cry and punch Daniel Bryan while doing so. At Survivor Series 2014, he turned on Team WWE, and then he turned heel again because it's the Big Show. But after the stuff with The Authority was done, and then after he was involved in the Andre Battle Royal with Shaquille O'Neal at WrestleMania 32, he didn't do much after that. He transitioned to a part-time role. He also participated in another superplex spot with Braun Strowman. He also lost a WWE title match to Drew McIntyre in the official main event of WrestleMania 36. Yeah, that was the official main event of WrestleMania 36. That happened on Monday Night Raw. The Drew McIntyre having his first WWE title defense against the Big Show. I kid you not. So, both Big Show and Mark Henry are currently in AEW as commentators for their side shows, Dark Elevation and Rampage. So, good match and good post-match setup for what was to come for their feud in the fall. So, for the WWE Championship Money in the Bank ladder match, that was next. And unlike with the field that was in the SmackDown Money in the Bank ladder match, the Raw side of things, there were at least some names that could have won this match. Like, and out of this field, you had Alberto Del Rio, Alex Riley, Evan Bourne, Jack Swagger, Kofi Kingston, The Jizz, The Miz, R-Truth, and Rey Mysterio. So, out of those names, you had guys like R-Truth, Rey Mysterio, The Jizz, and hell, even Alberto Del Rio. Having that field could have had a case to win that match. I know it's weird to say because a guy like R-Truth and The Jizz are jobbers, but at least in 2011, like, WWE still cared a little when it came to characters and personalities. Unlike today, they care like little to nothing about what really matters in pro wrestling: characters, storylines, matches with a clear-cut story, a clear-cut character by whoever's involved. Not these like faceless like matches with, oh, let's see what biggest spot we can have, or how fast or slow can we have this match, So at least there's something. So this match was actually fast and frantic. I mean, typical for a ladder match, right? So, for whatever reason, the fans in Chicago were actually cheering for the Jizz for whatever reason, even though he sucks. But at one point in the match, he was acting as if his knee was injured, and that eventually proved to be his downfall. Alberto Del Rio won this match when he strategically tore off Rey Mysterio's mask, and then he pushed him aside, then he grabbed the briefcase and won. This was the better match of the two Money in the Bank matches of that night. Del Rio winning the case, I mean, honestly, it was at a point where a lot of people started to lose interest in Del Rio because earlier in the year, he won the Royal Rumble. And even though he had a decent character, like he's this rich asshole, he shows off, he comes out in these fancy cars, and his promo skills were, he lost some major matches, especially when he lost his Royal Rumble opportunity at WrestleMania 27 in the opener against Edge. So, yeah, not only that, he didn't do a lot after he cashed in on CM Punk in the next pay-per-view, SummerSlam. He was just a transitional champion because he lost the WWE title to John Cena, and then he regained it 2 weeks later at Hell in a Cell, and then he was a transitional champion again at Survivor Series to CM Punk. I'm like, damn, dude. Like, how many times are you going to be a transitional champion? So, as I mentioned before, Alberto Del Rio cashed in at SummerSlam. I also forgot to mention that Alberto Del Rio, I'm going to spoil this now, he tried to cash in on CM Punk the first time later in the night after the main event, but CM Punk stopped him right away, like he knew it was coming. But again, he successfully cashed in on Punk at SummerSlam thanks to Kevin Nash. So for Del Rio, after the WWE title blunders, Del Rio would get a World Heavyweight Championship run in 2013, actually two of them, before he got relegated to lower mid-card status up to his release in 2016. And then it was after that point where we started to realize, yeah, he's an asshole in real life. Evan Bourne, after this match, would go on to form a tag team with Kofi Kingston called Air Boom. They would have a tag team title reign, but the problem with Evan Bourne, he does a lot of flips. Suspensions. Yeah, he got suspended like twice in the span of a year. And he also had a major motorcycle accident in March of 2012, and that would lead to his release in 2014. So, yeah, it came crashing down for Evan Bourne. Alex Riley, yeah, Jobberville. He went straight to Jobberville, and he got released in 2016. Jack Swagger, he had a decent run with the Real American gimmick in 2013, but after he broke up his tag team with Cesaro with the Real Americans in 2014, yeah, he didn't do much. He was relegated to jobber status up until his release in March 2017. Obviously, Jake Hager, formerly known as Jack Swagger, is in AEW with the Inner Circle with Chris Jericho, and he's also doing MMA. Kofi Kingston would hover around the mid card, be involved in various tag teams, as I mentioned before, with Evan Bourne, with R-Truth from 2011 to 2013, and then he got his big break from 2014 onwards with Big E Langston and Xavier Woods. They formed the New Day, and Kofi Mania ran wild in 2019 when Kofi Kingston won the WWE Championship. R-Truth continued his heel run. He teamed up with The Miz. They began the storyline where they're being conspired against by the new COO Triple H. But a loss to The Rock and John Cena at Survivor Series 2011 led to The Miz breaking the team up. And then after that, Truth pretty much He was just hovering around the lower undercard. And he still does to this day. But I will say this about R-Truth. He makes good use of his screen time that's given to him. He he cracks a lot of jokes. He has this charm. He has that charisma. He has that personality to him. He's pretty funny. So R-Truth, he's a gem. With the Jizz though, he went on to be a multi-time Intercontinental Champion, and he even won the WWE title again a decade later, this past February at the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view. Don't even say more about the Jizz. Rey Mysterio would win the WWE title a week after the pay-per-view, after this one, the Money in the Bank 2011, because of the storyline that they were going with, that Vince McMahon stripped CM Punk of the WWE title, and they created this tournament that began the night after Money in the Bank, and the week after was the finals between Rey Mysterio and The Miz. Sadly for Mysterio, he lost it to John Cena the same night. So, for Mysterio's tenure, the rest of his WWE tenure, he didn't do much. He was hampered by injuries. Then he also got suspended. And WWE mishandled his booking, especially with his tag team with Sin Cara. I mean, for as disinteresting Sin Cara is, I mean, I thought it would have been a good like lucha tag team. But what also hurt me was, like, as a Rey Mysterio mark, he was booed by the crowd at the 2014 Royal Rumble. Yeah, because they didn't get their precious Daniel Bryan at number 30. Like, guys, it's Rey Mysterio. Have some respect. So Mysterio left in 2015. Then he competed around the world, came back in 2018, and that's where he is to this day. He's back home with WWE. So I think out of all this, I think most of the field in this Raw Money in the Bank title ladder match is no longer in WWE. I think R-Truth, Kofi, The Miz, Mysterio are all still with WWE. So half of the field's gone. But, I mean, they're still doing big things, I guess, with WWE. So, then we get to the main event matches. First, the World Heavyweight Championship between Randy Orton and Christian. And obviously, as I mentioned with the stipulation, if Randy Orton lost by disqualification or there was poor officiating, Orton would lose the title to Christian. And I will say this, I don't know, the match didn't feel that great. It wasn't terrible by any means, but the special stipulation, I felt like it was only brought to play like twice. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but for me, they could have used it at least 2 more times. They only brought it in at the beginning, at the end. The beginning where Christian tried to get Randy Orton to use a chair on him, and at the end where Christian finally got Randy Orton disqualified. He spat in his face, and Randy Orton got into this uncontrollable rage where that led to him kicking Christian in the nuts, and that led to his downfall, and he lost the World Heavyweight title. So other than that, everything that happened in between those two things, this was just a regular match that they previously had before. But at least towards the end, the crowd was a little bit into it, but they were just ready for the main event. But I could say that the post-match stuff that Randy Orton did, it at least got the crowd like excited. At least got the crowd like, you know, ready for the main event. Randy Orton went on this RKO spree on Christian on the announce table. And for a crowd that was actually like anti-Orton, they actually jumped on the bandwagon when Randy Orton hit those 2 RKOs on Christian on the announce table. So, like, by the end of the World Heavyweight Championship match, they were pro Orton. Like, Orton managed to turn that crowd in favor of him. So, goddamn, pretty good stuff by Randy Orton. So, long term, Randy Orton would get the title back from Christian at SummerSlam the next month in a really good no holds barred match, and that's like really a good way to end the feud. Obviously, they would have the steel cage match, but that's the real feud ender between Orton and Christian. Randy Orton would lose the World Heavyweight Championship to Mark Henry at Night of Champions, like I mentioned before. And Randy Orton would go on to have continued success in WWE, win the WWE title 5 more times, and improve as the years went on. I know some people don't like Randy Orton, but you gotta admit, he gradually got better. Compare him to his first 10 years in the WWE, and compare him to his next 8 to now. Like, he's pretty good now. Obviously, he's not great, but he's pretty good compared to his first decade in the company. So he's gotten a lot better, especially as a heel. He is pretty good. He's pretty damn good with his gimmick as a wrestler. Meanwhile, for Christian, he lost the World Heavyweight Championship to Randy Orton at SummerSlam, but after that, not too much happened with Christian in his time with WWE after that, unfortunately. Christian would win the Intercontinental Championship in 2012, but injuries, especially a concussion in 2014, would lead to an early retirement. And after 7 years, Christian made his in-ring return at the Royal Rumble in 2021. That match was won by Edge, his best friend. But immediately after, he became a free agent. And now he's with AEW. And he had his first match since 2014, beating Kazarian in an episode on Dynamite. Which, by the way, it's still kind of weird how Christian wrestled at the Royal Rumble this year, but decided to leave and go to AEW. I mean, obviously his choice, no problem, but kind of weird. Kind of weird how that turned out in the end. So now we have the main event. This was the big fight feel. This is the match that everyone was waiting for. You could clearly tell in the crowd that they had to sit through nearly 2 hours just to get to this match. They had to get through all the filler, especially with the DOS match, some people the World Heavyweight Championship match, the Mark Henry versus the Big Show match. They finally got through all the filler. Now imagine if they had to sit through a 2016 to 2020 era pay-per-view that was like 4 to 5 hours long. They would have been like dead ass tired, and the reaction would have been as loud. But if this was the main event. But thankfully, this show was under 3 hours. Like, this is like the length of Monday Night Raw nowadays. So, it's main event time. John Cena versus CM Punk for the WWE title. And at the time, this was the first time in a long time where whatever type of wrestling fan you were, whether it be a casual, a core, or a hardcore fan, this was a big time match. This had a big fight feel. You could tell by the reaction of the crowd. You could tell it by how the internet was feeling. This felt important. Like I said at the top of this video, this audio, whatever, however you're listening to this podcast, this retrospective, this old Icebox edition of Very Cold Lasagna today. Even before the match began, this felt important. This match, honestly, in my opinion, like, was a stepping stone to changing how pro wrestling was going to be. And obviously it turned out to be for the worst, but it still felt important. And it felt that way because CM Punk got that hometown welcome, probably one of the loudest pops, one of the loudest reactions in a long time, obviously, since actually 2 years with Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker in that match at WrestleMania 25. And then Cena, on the other hand, got that hostile reaction, since that was reminiscent of ECW One Night Stand 2006. So the reactions continued that way. It was reminiscent of a lot of matches. So throughout the match, the reactions, the people that were cheering for Punk, they were like pro CM Punk, obviously it's in his hometown, and everyone was anti Cena until obviously the supporters for Cena started to get like noticeably audible. So the reaction stayed that way throughout the match, even during the slow portions of the match early on with the rest holds and the slow moves. They stayed through it all. The reactions were still there, and I will say this: there were a lot of false finishes and kicks and like typical indie technical work rate bullshit. In this match, it just felt like there's a purpose to sell they were in there for a purpose to sell the importance of how much both men were desperate in this match. Now, I'm against those kicks and false finishes, but for this match, it just felt important. Like these men were giving everything they had to win this match, because for Punk, he wanted to legitimize his claim as the best in the world, and he also wanted to make a mockery of the company on his last night by absconding with the WWE title and stay true to his word that, yeah, I'm leaving with the title on my last night. And for Cena, all the pressure was on him because he had to win. He had to use everything in this playbook to keep the title and his job in storyline. So the crowd was into the match the whole way, whether it was John Cena hitting 2 consecutive AAs, or Punk locking in the Anaconda Vice, or CM Punk hitting the go to sleep, but Cena was able to get out of the ring. The crowd was in this match the whole way through, even if it was kind of long. It was pretty long for a WWE title match. So we get towards the end, and the Montreal Screwjob aspect of this match was teased pretty heavily. And it intensifies when Mr. McMahon and John Laurinaitis come out, and once CM Punk is about to win the match, or not CM Punk, John Cena is about to make CM Punk tap out with the STF, Mr. McMahon orders John Laurinaitis to go to the ring, have the referee ring the bell, but John Cena immediately notices this, and he runs out of the ring and clotheslines John Laurinaitis, and he's like, we're not going to do it this way. We're going to do it my way, the honorable way, the Super Cena way. It was, this screwjob element was good because it played into John Cena's good guy gimmick, and that ended up costing him the title and his job. CM Punk won with the go to sleep. He won the title in a match that had a balance of everything. This is exactly what I clamor for. You have the technical wrestling that smarks want, but you also have the story and the characters that casuals want. This was a clear example of balancing everything that fans want. If you want your technical wrestling, but if you also want your clear story and clear characters, clear personality, you got it in this one match. And again, this is just my opinion. This was the definition of having that balance, having that fine line of what it means to be an actual wrestling fan. There has to be that 50-50 balance of you can have the technical wrestling, but we also need to have why is this match happening? What's the story? What's the heat? Who are the characters? What's X's character? What's Y's character? Why is this match happening? This match had that. Again, just my opinion. We can agree to disagree. So, as I mentioned earlier, Alberto Del Rio tries to come in to cash in under orders from Mr. McMahon, but CM Punk kicks him in the head, and Punk walks away, blows a kiss to Vince, and he walks away, in air quotes. in the crowd to end this show. And that was the 2011 Money in the Bank pay-per-view. And before I give my overall thoughts, let's talk about what happened after this match. Long term, as I already covered in my Pipe Bomb retro review, Punk signed a new contract at the last moment. Behind the scenes, he returned a week after the pay-per-view, got a new theme song, got that cult of personality. But it became clear at SummerSlam that the glitz and glamour, it was gone. He retained the title against Cena in that undisputed WWE title match, but he got attacked by Kevin Nash, and then he lost the title by an Alberto Del Rio cash-in. So that would begin the downfall of not only CM Punk as trying to be a draw for the company, but also CM Punk, trying, in the company, because, well, CM Punk felt that they don't appreciate me, they don't care about me. Like, I put in all this effort to improve, to try to improve, and they just don't give a shit. That's pretty much, he became bitter after that. So he pretty much faced the same issues that plagued him prior to the Pipe Bomb promo. Lack of trust between him, Vince, and Triple H. It was pretty much him versus Vince and Triple H prior to Money in the Bank and after Money in the Bank. And then poor creative, health issues, and as such, even after a long WWE title reign that spanned for 434 days, he walked out of the company the day after the 2014 Royal Rumble. And he still tries to crap on them every chance he gets. Sometimes. Sometimes. He still says some good things, but a lot of times he craps on them. So he returned as an analyst for the failed backstage show on FS1. But other than that, yeah, CM Punk doesn't have the same drawing power. He doesn't have the same relevancy that he once had in 2011 to 2014, and even the same relevancy, not even the same relevancy when he had that failed UFC career. And apparently there are like speculation now that CM Punk is trying to make an in-ring return, and his preference is AEW. And a lot of people are saying that, if CM Punk goes to AEW, it's going to shake the landscape of pro wrestling. It's going to make the ratings go up. And I'm going to tell you this, wrestling fans. CM Punk is not going to give AEW a ratings bump. It's not going to draw them a dime. Casual viewers, new viewers, the true wrestling fans are probably going to ask, just like with the rest of the AEW roster, who the fuck is this guy? See, like I said before, just moments ago, CM Punk isn't a relevant name in the year 2021. Nobody's going to give a fuck about him. I wouldn't say nobody. I'll admit that. Most people, most normal people, wouldn't give a fuck about CM Punk. I mean, personally, for me, I'd be like, cool, CM Punk's in AEW. Like, I'll give him a chance, but it's just hard to give him one after he's been gone for so long from wrestling for so long. So we'll just see what happens with that. But as for John Cena, he still remained WWE's go-to guy up until 2017. Obviously, never fired in storyline. He had that new storyline began when Triple H became the quote-unquote COO on TV, and he was forced to fire his father-in-law, Vince. And as for John Cena, he would go on to win the WWE title 4 more times. He also won the World Heavyweight Championship at some point. He would go on to headline even more pay-per-views, even during CM Punk's WWE title reign in 2012. And then after 2017, he transitioned to his Hollywood career. So obviously, recently, he had that movie Fast 9 come out. So John Cena is doing good in the movies. And just recently, he came back to WWE at Money in the Bank 2021, having that stare down with Roman Reigns over a decade after the match with CM Punk. Ironically, like, unlike where he was booed in Chicago, he was cheered like unanimously in Fort Worth, Texas. Like, what a difference a decade makes, you know? Like, the more Cena is gone, the more you appreciate him. Like, goddamn, that's crazy. Like, at one point have I never like truly hated Cena. Like, I was always a Cena fan. Like, the decision making around Cena was like at some points was questionable, but like I always liked Cena. So overall, Money in the Bank 2011 was a good show. Not a pretty good or very good, just good. Just a good show. The highlights were the Raw Money in the Bank, Big Show versus Mark Henry, and obviously John Cena versus CM Punk. Those were the three highlights of this pay-per-view watching it back. Like, for some people saying, oh, Money in the Bank 2011 is one of the greatest pay-per-views of all time, or it's like the greatest Money in the Bank pay-per-view of all time, it's, I don't know, I can't really agree with that sentiment. It is pretty much just a one-match show. But I will say this, it was a really good it's a good pay-per-view. But everything that happened afterwards, it went downhill. Like, it pretty much went downhill for everyone involved. Like, except for John Cena, except for Rey Mysterio, except for The Miz, except for R-Truth, except for Kofi Kingston, except for Kane. Like, very few wrestlers involved in this pay-per-view. Oh, except for Big Show, except for Mark Henry. Like, the top name guys, like, long term, like, they didn't get hurt as much, unlike compared to a lot of names I mentioned. So honestly, it's very weird watching this back, see how far every wrestler involved has either progressed or regressed, like I just mentioned, especially CM Punk. Yeah, he is like definitely fell off the most, even with that 434-day title reign, because of just how jaded he became, like, ever since then. So I will say, if you want to watch Money in the Bank 2011, it's a good show. It has its moments. It's still kind of defined by just one more match. I will say, I would definitely give the World Heavyweight Championship and Big Show versus Mark Henry, and even the Raw Money in the Bank ladder match a watch, because honestly, those were the highlights. Those were some of the highlights of that night leading up to Cena versus Punk. So overall, Money in the Bank 2011, it was a good show. It remains just a good show, even by its one match. It's one match monkier. So that was my retro review of the Money in the Bank 2011 pay-per-view. And we are once again closing the old icebox until we have to go back to the past again. So thank you all for joining me for this retro review of Money in the Bank 2011, another edition of the old icebox here on Very Cold Lasagna. What'd you guys think about Money in the Bank 2011? What'd you think about John Cena versus CM Punk for the WWE title? Did you ever watch it? Did you not? And I would like to know, what did you do in 2011 at the time this pay-per-view was happening? It'd be interesting. It always interests me. Like, what did I do in 2011 during this time? I don't even remember what I was doing. Besides watching the pay-per-view. I don't even remember what I did the day before, the day after. I honestly don't know. But this is why I like doing these retrospective series on the podcast. But it is what it is. But anyway, thank you for joining me on this episode of Very Cold Lasagna. I'm your host, Dylan Lasagna. Thank you for joining me. Make sure to listen to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and Spotify. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Listen to the show on the audio platforms. Follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna. And as always, keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge with your takes on the world of pro wrestling and sports. Very cold as always. And until next time, peace out.